Be seated. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, this gospel lesson for today, when I read it, I feel kind of bad. It's like Jesus is almost saying, like, well, if you even had a teeny tiny little bit of faith, if you had a teeny tiny little bit of faith, like the faith the size of a mustard seed, you could be throwing trees all over the place. There'd be trees flying through the air at all times. If only you were a real Christian. Honestly. If only we were real Christians, we could do all kinds of magical powers. You know, we could heal the sick with a touch and no worrying with surgeons and doctors and hospitals and all of that. We could raise the dead with a word and they would be with us all the time and we wouldn't have to grieve. And we wouldn't have to trust God to hold our beloved until it's time. Feel kind of bad. So I went to see a member of our church. I'll call her Jane today. And not many of you know Jane. She only came to church for a year or two some years ago. Jane lives in a memory care center in LaGrange. And I went to see Jane because Jane is on my list. And it's my job to go see the people on my list. And that day, when I went to see Jane, I was not feeling particularly full of the Spirit. I was not full of vim and vigor and vitality. That wasn't bad. It was just a day. It was Friday. It was a day. I was going to see Jane on a day. It was a day. And sat down next to Jane and said, Jane, I'm Pastor Andy from St. John Lutheran Church. She says, oh, yeah, I remember you. Kind of looking at the air. I said, how are you feeling today? Fine. And then she perks up and she says, oh, I'm moving tomorrow. She says. The attendant behind her smiles going, no. I'm moving tomorrow. And I made a mistake at this point. Okay, I messed up, I misstepped. I said, where are you moving to? Now, this is a dumb mistake. Do not ask people who have memory issues about the immediate past or the immediate future. They do not know. You're just going to upset them and make them feel uncomfortable. She looked at me like she had not thought of it before at all. The idea had not occurred to her where she was moving to. She goes, I don't know. I went, oh man, I messed up. Oh, mistake. So I noticed next to her was her walker, okay? And Jane does not like to use her walker. It impedes her progress, all right? And she likes to go up and down the hallway to wherever she's going. She's going and she's going. She don't want to have this stupid big old thing in front of her. And all the attendants are in great consternation because she's going to fall, which she does, and she bounces usually, but nobody needs a broken hip, right? I see you've got your walker with you, I say to Jane. She says, yes. I say, do you use your walker? No. Attendant behind her goes, no. I look over to the other side of the room. And there's a fish tank, which a lot of times in memory care units or in long-term care units, you have like a fish tank, or you have a bird's cage with little birds flying around tweeting inside, or maybe you have a dog there, a therapy dog, and a really placid, low-key, calm dog, and it helps everybody to be calm. And not just calm, but animals around, even a fish in a fish tank, connect us with this unspoken, beautiful, powerful, deep, just visceral peace, power, connection. So I say, oh, look over there, there's some fish. And she says, yes. And one of the fish is chasing one of the other fish. And the fish gets away. And we watch the fish for a little while. And I say, Jane, would you like to have communion today? Yes, I would like to have communion, please, he says. So I pour the wine and I put out the bread. And we say the prayers. And I read the gospel lesson for next week, not this week. And it's the story next week is the story of the 10 lepers, which she has taught to children for decades before she arrived in the memory care, before she had to retire. And I said, you taught that story. And she remembers that part, see, because that's way back. Yes, she says. And then we said the Lord's Prayer, which she remembered most of. And we shared the bread and the wine. And we finished up, and she said, thank you for bringing me communion. I said, of course. She goes, oh, and I need to tell you, I'm moving tomorrow. But I don't know where I'm going. I said, well, wherever you go, wherever you are, God is going to be with you. God is with you all the time, no matter what. And we'll find you. We'll figure out where you are. Jane probably does not remember my visit. She may not have remembered it that evening after dinner. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Because God remembers. And it occurs to me, which would we rather have? Which would we rather be able to do? Uproot trees or go and see Jane? I'll tell you something. For me, the answer is not difficult. That's where God is. I wonder whether Jesus is not saying so much, if only you were Christians, you could fly trees through the air. And I could give you a whole bunch of scholarly stuff. They are confused. They can't quite figure it out because it's called a conditional counterfactual. But maybe Jesus is saying, you have even a tiny bit of faith, you can do wonders. Even the tiniest little bit of faith, not feeling that great, and you bless somebody else. You share the presence of God in whatever way, through your attitude or your action or your speech. Just being there for somebody. It's wonders. Now, Jesus continues his gospel lesson with an example. And this example was common in every day and familiar to the people of his day. He uses the example of a person who is enslaved. Now, before I get into what Jesus is trying to say, I am contractually obligated as a Christian pastor to repeat the obvious. And the reason why is because sometimes in the church we are required to repeat the obvious lest we forget. This is the obvious. It doesn't matter whether everybody else is doing something. If it's wrong, it's still wrong. And slavery is an abomination upon the earth, an institution forged in the nether pit of hell, and a demonstration of demonic evil. In all its forms, it is not to be tolerated anywhere, at any time, in any way. Having said that, I think what Jesus is trying to tell us is, why do we go see people like Jane? Because Jane is very nice, and she's kind and kind of vague, but she is sweet. And not all people in memory care units are sweet. Sometimes we're having a hard time, and we're not particularly nice. Why do we go see folks? Why do we care for Jane in the first place? Is it really because she taught all those children and so she earned it? Surely that brings our compassion out and our connection for her, but is that really why? Last week, Nancy fell out of her wheelchair right in front of our church. It was terrible. It was horrible. It was just awful, 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 awful. She broke her femur. It was terrible. And a whole bunch of you, not everybody because we didn't want to get in the way, but a whole bunch of you all gathered around out there, and Doug went to get ice for her leg, and Patty held an umbrella to keep the sun off of her face, and Glenn was a doctor, and he came and talked to her and found out that she had diabetes, and this woman named Tara stopped by with her friend John and helped to keep her calm, all kinds of like that. Well, because we love Nancy. But why do we care about Nancy? The paramedics came, they gave her a shot to take the edge off the pain. It still hurt a lot. And then they took her to the hospital, and a surgeon worked on her femur and did surgery so that she could recover. Why did the surgeon do that? She has no money to pay the surgeon. Why do we care? I went on and on last week about caring, right? Why do we care about people in our city who don't have a place to live? And I know the problem is complicated, but why do we care? Why do we care about people on the other side of the world who don't have anything to eat or who are being attacked and killed? Why should we care about them? Because Jesus told us to. That's why. It ain't rocket science. But Jesus told us to. This is who we are. A Jesus people. People of the cross. A people of hope. That's who we are. The reason why we do what Jesus tells us to do is because of what Jesus does for us. Jesus comes to us when we have forgotten who we are. When we have forgotten that we are made in the image of God. When we have forgotten that we are beautiful in our inner core. Yes, you, I'm talking about you. I'm not going to give anybody the stink eye, but you, all right? Are beautiful beyond comprehension. And we forget that. You are dignified from the dawn of time, and we forget that. We forget who we are, and Jesus comes to see us when we have memory issues of the deepest kind. Jesus comes to us when we are flat out on the pavement in agony, helpless. Jesus saves. That's why we care. Because God cares for us. Thanks be to God.